Imagine you're the CEO of a company. You walk through the office and everything seems to look exactly as it should. The systems are in place, HR policies, they're clear. Promotions are structured around performance, and from every measurable angle, the organisation appears fair. If there were serious problems, you'd expect to see them. That's what the data suggests. That's what the structure is designed to ensure. Now take that same company on the same day, but shift your position. You're no longer at the top, you're an employee, closer to the day-to-day reality of how things actually play out. And from here, you begin to notice patterns that never show up in reports. Certain people seem to get fast-tracked, while others are often overlooked. Some voices carry more weight in meetings, while others are quietly ignored. Opportunities don't always feel as evenly distributed as the policies suggest. There's a subtle unease, nothing dramatic, nothing easily measurable, but something that doesn't quite align with the idea of a perfectly fair system. So which version is true? This is where a powerful philosophical idea comes in, standpoint epistemology. It was developed by thinkers like Nancy Harstock and Sandra Harding, and at its core, it challenges a very common assumption, that objectivity simply means removing bias and seeing things as they are. Instead, it argues something more uncomfortable and more interesting. Your social position doesn't just distort your view on reality, it actually helps produce it. More importantly, it suggests that people in marginalised or less powerful positions often have access to forms of knowledge that those in dominant positions systematically miss. Not because they are inherently more perceptive, but because their position forces them to pay attention to things others can afford to ignore. In other words, being on the ground isn't a limitation, it's a resource. Think about today's day and age. Politicians seem to be doing things that are opposed to what we're seeing on the ground at our level. We kind of think, well, how stupid is that decision? Because of X, Y, and Z. But again, is that the case that because of their position, they are unable to see these issues? Think about even the workplace again. A senior manager might genuinely believe the company operates fairly because, from their vantage point, the system is functioning as intended. The policies are neutral, the processes are structured, and nothing appears obviously broken. But someone lower down, especially someone from a marginalised background, experiences the system differently. They don't just see the rules, they see how those rules are applied in practice. They notice the small inconsistencies, the informal behaviours, the patterns that never quite make it into official documentation. From the top, everything looks coherent, but from the ground, the gaps become visible. And this isn't limited to workspaces. Consider modern conversations around social media. For example, platforms represent opportunity, networking, business growth, personal branding. For others, the same platforms are a source of pressure, comparison, and exclusion. Neither perception is false, but they are shaped by very different positions within the same system. This mistake happens when one perspective dismisses the other simply because it doesn't align with their own experience. This is where standpoint epistemology becomes especially important. It doesn't just tell us that people see things differently, it tells us that some of those differences are informative. They reveal aspects of reality that are otherwise hidden. But there's also a need for balance. This theory is often misunderstood as saying that marginalised perspectives are always correct, or that dominant perspectives are inherently flawed. That's not the point. Every standpoint has limitations. Someone at the top may miss the lived experience of individuals, but they might see broader patterns and structures that are invisible from below. Likewise, someone on the ground might see immediate realities with clarity, but not always the full systemic picture. The real insight isn't about choosing one perspective over another. It's about recognizing that knowledge is distributed, and that ignoring certain viewpoints, especially those closer to the problem, creates blind spots. History gives us extreme examples of what happens when those blind spots go unchecked. During World War II, Adolf Hitler advanced into Russia. Soldiers on the ground reported brutal conditions, freezing temperatures, failing equipment, physical exhaustion. From their standpoint, retreat wasn't weakness, it was reality. But from a distance, those conditions were easier to underestimate. The result was a catastrophic misalignment between decision-making and lived experience. While that example is extreme, the underlying pattern is common. When people become far removed from the realities experienced by others, their understanding becomes incomplete. And when that incomplete understanding informs decisions, the consequences can be serious. So what does this mean for you? It means asking a different kind of question. Not just am I right, but what might I be unable to see from where I stand? Where in your life are you operating from the equivalent of the top, assuming things are fine because no problems have reached you yet? And where might someone else, someone closer to the situation or in a less powerful position, be seeing something you don't? At the same time, if you're the one on the ground, noticing things others overlook, it's worth recognizing that your perspective holds value, not just as a complaint, but as insight. Because that's the real takeaway here. Perspective isn't just a limitation to overcome. In many cases, it's a source of understanding. And the people we're more likely to ignore are often the one who can show us what we're missing. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to follow, like, comment and subscribe. And just a quick shout out to our sponsors. Strong Coffee Company, protein packed coffee for energy and clarity. Use code VANCROOKS1 for 20% off at strongcoffeecompany.com. And then there's More Labs, clinically proven hydration and recovery drinks. Use code VANCROOKS1 for 25% off at morelabs.com. And finally, liquor gummies, electrolytes and vitamins for hangover prevention. Use code VANCROOKS1 for 20% off at liquor.com. That's liquure.com.